Okay, welcome, welcome. And Johnny will pop in here. There we go. Johnny and I are happy to be with you today. Scott will be joining us in just a minute. And as often happens, we're sitting here having fun, and he's having fun rebooting his computer and doing. Hey, uh, no matter how long you're in this business, we all have these minor panic attacks when something isn't working. And so, Johnny, I think
Yes.
I think you've known him. You've known Scott for what, 15 days now? Is
Yeah.
that
um,
and
I knew him as a zygote way back when. We've known each other for many years. I was going to ask him how. Oh, thank you. And here's Joanna handing me coffee magically. Woo! That little hand waving. um, I never remember. I almost never remember how or when I meet people. I remember that suddenly they're in my life, and I don't remember them not being in it. Like I don't remember that we've talked about this. I don't really remember meeting you, but I don't remember not knowing you. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
and
I
I'm the
think,
same way. Yeah, you're so memorable that I can't think of when
yeah, you
we.
can't forget me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Speaking of not forget, did you get the cookies I sent you?
I did. I did, and I've eaten two of them already.
That's
Oh,
hey,
oh,
as I
oh.
breathe and live. And Paul Rubin's here too. He's in the audience. Scott, can you hear us?
Hey there.
Hold on.
Well, he tends to his. He's in his office now. I don't know where he is. I know exactly where he is. Scott is the coolest office in the world. That's really neat. And there he is in it. Hello, brother. How you doing?
Hold on. People can't see him yet. Now,
People can't see
also,
me? Okay.
Scott,
Yes,
there's something running in the background. Almost sounds like somebody's vacuuming.
it's my gardener.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Let me bring
it's
Scott in here. Okay. So
Okay.
Scott just transferred to a different computer, and I'm gonna
Okay.
bring him in.
Yeah,
Right
I don't know
here.
can everybody else hear us talking
They can
about
hear us
Scott?
talking
Even though
about Scott.
yeah.
Yes.
Scott Brick, Scott Brick, Scott Brick.
Wait, now watch this. Hold on. I'm gonna bring you in here, Scott. So that
Here's
everybody
Scott and his leaf blower come to join us.
Now we live here in LA, and of course, I'm the same way. Where there are moments. Now this is how a narrator's life, because the world is a quiet place until you invite Scott Brick or you start recording. One of those two things, and the leaf blowers come out. So, how you
you know
doing,
the
Scott?
great thing is down in my booth I can't hear them, but we
Yeah.
just couldn't get my computer down there to play well with others today.
It's the same here in New York City. I live on a reasonably busy street, and I hear when I'm in the living room there, I hear the sirens and everything, but in the booth, I don't hear anything.
Yeah,
I guess the whole point of the damn booth.
I know exactly.
So Scott,
So,
how
Mr.
much
Brick,
did
sorry,
you?
go ahead, Doug.
By the way, so this is before we do the normal thing. Your booth is an investment of what, 10, $15, and then that way you can record while the leaf blower's going.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. Um, years ago I had what I always called my Harry Potter booth. It was just the space underneath the stairs, and I had I paid a contractor to come in and wall it off and put a door in and soundproof it to the extent that I could, and it was terrible. It was just job. I would never get away from leaf blowers. I could, if my neighbors, my next door neighbors, if they sneezed really hard, I could hear it in my booth. And finally, during COVID, actually, a colleague, Travis Baldry, he was selling his booth. I said, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So best thing I ever did.
All right. So let's start this over. So first thing, welcome to the show, and after this is the way it works in life. Okay. You plan something, you test things, and then occasionally something goes wrong. What do we, all three of us, do? We laugh about it. Usually, I'm laughing at
Exactly.
myself, and then we adapt and we move on. And in this business, if you're not willing to do that, it is going to be a tough business to be in, because stuff happens. And
Yep.
then the best thing is, these two are some of the best people I've run into. So Johnny, how long have you known Mr. Brick here?
We were discussing that when Scott was trying to work his computer. I want to say 15 or more years, but I don't really remember.
I'm
Do you
pretty.
recall meeting how we met? I don't.
Um, Yeah, because I rue the day.
It was Fleet Week, wasn't it?
It was what?
Fleet Week.
Yeah, I think
I was in my sailor outfit.
I think we met in the shower.
That's
Um, uh,
At the jail?
YMCA.
At the
yeah,
jail?
right, exactly. Um, I think you approached me at APAC one year, if I'm remembering correctly, and just been thick as thieves
Yeah.
since. And that was, it's probably 15 years ago now.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
We've been very close friends. And here's an interesting thing that you don't know about. You know the icon, Scott Brigg. And you have these thoughts of, but when you get to know him, he's not all that.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Nice sporty haircut though.
Thank you. Yeah.
So what
Yeah,
I want
that-
to ask you is, when you started, you were I don't think you even recorded at home, because people, when
No.
you and Johnny started, that wasn't a thing. Home recording was for the quote amateurs and the lightweights. And so how did you get your start going? Like, what do you remember the first studio you went in, and what you recorded, and how'd that go? And
I do. I actually remember the exact date because I wrote it down for tax purposes. I was just, slavish about writing down all the details so I could write things off. It was June 10th of 1999, and I was at Dove Audio in Beverly Hills, which sadly isn't around anymore. They went BK a couple of years after I started there. I like to think it wasn't my fault. But that was actually how I met Dan Musselman. Until recently, one of the primary producers at Books on Tape, and then Random House, and then of course Penguin Random House. It was his last day at Dove Audio, and it was my first day recording an audiobook. And he happened to hear me in the booth, and he gave me his card and said, "Give me a call. I'm gonna have a studio in about a month, and maybe we can do some stuff together."
Can you now, for perspective?
Yeah.
You've done 25 books since that time. Is that close?
I've done 1,100 books since then,
Okay.
and I venture to say at least 600 of those were for Dan.
Well, by the way, so your website's out of date. I think it says 800 when I read your bio here the other day. And now, but here's what I find funny. If people aren't impressed with 800 books, they ain't going to be impressed with 1,100 books.
Right.
Okay? I mean, you've done enough books that it kind of... So I have a question. Johnny, why do you think someone like Scott Brigg continues to get hired?
Probably because of his close relationship with me. Be my best guess. No, here's why Scott Brigg gets hired. And here's why the people who get hired all the time is because they do consistently good work. While Scott wins awards regularly and has earphones and stuff, you know what? Those are all nice and they look great on the shelves. But it's the consistent good work that leads to the next job. Always, time and time again. It's not one good gig. It's consistent good work where he's sharing the author's truth, being an engaging storyteller, and in terms of business practices, he gets it done in the timeline when it's due. And so people count on him, yes?
If I could contribute one thing to that conversation, on that day, on June 10th, 1999, I remember I had auditioned, and they said, "Great, come on in and do these 2 short stories." And what I remember thinking is, this is the audition. Even though I had passed the audition and I got the gig, even though I was being paid for that day's work, I knew it was 2 short stories. If I sucked, then they were only out, maybe $400, like 200 for each one of them. But if I was good, then they could make money off of it. And if I was good, then I would get a full novel the next time. And that's what happened. So I knew that today's gig is my audition for the next one. And I have never forgotten that. Every single time I do a book, 1,100 books later, I know that today's gig, I'm auditioning for the next one.
Yeah,
always.
That's
good. That's great. Now, I have a question for you, Scott. And there's going to be other questions that come up eventually. I know that you just put out the your new e-learning demo that J. Michael
Mhm.
Collins did for you. It's wonderful. It's great, and I think
Thank
we can
you.
all agree J. Michael is great at demos, and yours sounds fantastic. Now, you and I chatted about this, but everybody listening didn't, so I'm going to bring it up again. You have this. Here's Scott Brick, audiobook star. I mean, you're doing. You don't have to do e-learning. You don't have to do documentary voiceovers. You don't have to do all the things you do. I mean, you could make a career and a life on audiobooks. But here you are, Scott Brick, who's busy as far as anyone's concerned all the time. Where do you find time to now that you have an e-learning demo? How are you going to market that? What marketing? Let's do this. What marketing does Scott Brick feel he needs to do?
That's a great question. You and I know we're on the same page. We're very like-minded because we always talk about this in our business seminar. The whole thing is about being more employable, right? I was in Switzerland at a voiceover conference that J. Michael Collins was putting on, and I happened to sit in his class, and as he was talking about e-learning, and I'm blessed. My position in the industry, I'm at the higher end of the pay scale. The amount that he's getting paid for e-learning is double what I'm making doing an audiobook, and I get paid pretty well to do an audiobook. So what I have to do is I have to go looking for clients. First thing I have to do is bump up my website's SEO. Because hey, I could have the best demo in the world, but I can't make a client listen to it. Can't make them listen to it. But if I make sure that when you Google, when a prospective client is looking to hire somebody, I can bump it up, bump up my chances. There's a term for it, and I'm brand new to this world, so forgive me. It's a type of score that you have. J. Michael, I think it's on a scale of 1 to 100, and J. Michael's got a 42, which means he never has to go looking for work. He makes sure that with a score of 42, that he is going to be on the first page of a Google search for anybody looking to do e-learning. So as a result, he was flying from Europe to Washington, D.C. He has houses in both locations. And while he's in the air, he's like, oh, don't bother me. I can't do anything. I'm on a plane. I can't do anything. The United Nations gets in touch and says they need him to do, a summary for them. And he goes, well, maybe. Okay. The United Nations. Okay. And I have no idea how he did it, but I think when he landed, he probably went off into the men's room and recorded it. I have no idea. But that all began with him investing time and money every single month. He told me that he puts together I think he's got a budget of $500 that he puts into SEO every single month, like clockwork, and he makes multiple times that amount back.
So that's taking what you just said and putting it out there, because audiobook narrators are a specific breed, but not everybody makes Scott Brick money. Not everybody makes Johnny Heller money. Some of us have to live on Don Baarns money. It's hard.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
If you're working and doing this, what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that you should investigate other voiceover areas and be willing, however, not just to do it as a crapshoot, but go ahead and investigate and go ahead and invest, because you're investing in yourself.
You are.
And I believe that we all three agree that in this business, it's self-marketing, we have to stop thinking of ourselves as just an actor who will do a job.
Exactly.
We have to start thinking of ourselves as a business entity.
You and I, we always start our seminar the same way. I always tell people, our encouragement is for everybody who comes is always take off the creative hat for a minute. That's where we live. We live underneath the creative hat, but you have to take it off and you have to put on the businessman, the business person hat. You have to, because as I always say, You will never, ever get paid what you deserve. It will never happen. You will never get paid what you deserve, but you will get paid what you negotiate. So
Great.
that process is ongoing. It needs to happen every single day.
So what has changed in the last couple of years that you've noticed about you getting work,
Um,
if anything?
I'm busier. Um, the more I'm a firm believer that the more you put into things, the more you get out of it. And I put in a lot of time and effort on my career, and I tell you, when COVID hit, everybody was scared, and rightfully so. And I have several friends of mine who have been trying to transition into full-time voice work, but their day job was in food service, and they lost their job immediately. Every single one of them. A friend of mine, it was the manager for 10 years of Nobu in Beverly Hills. It's one of the toniest restaurants in the world. God, you got to. It's the kind of place I always. George Reeves on Superman years ago. He said, "It's the kind of place where you got to go in and get an estimate on a donut." Um, but he got fired one day into COVID, as did everybody else. But he's the manager. I'm like, I get it. Everybody is losing their job, and all of our colleagues, you remember, we were all wondering, how are we going to do? Are we going to be okay? During COVID,
Yeah.
and I had 100% certainty that we would be fine.
Yeah.
That, excuse me, those of us who had invested the time and effort and the money, of course, to put in a home studio, I was like, it's look at the Great Depression. Movies made a shit ton of money because people needed entertainment.
Yep.
And so, frankly, I have never been busier than since we all went into lockdown. And I'm grateful every day. I'm grateful. I think of my friends in food service, and I gave thanks every single day.
Yeah, they certainly didn't expect the whole world to shut down at the level they did, and our business kept going. Now, the flip side of that is thousands and thousands and thousands of people decided they were going to join the voiceover world, the audiobook world, and they've flooded in, and that right now we're seeing a trickle go away. One of the unfortunate things that I see, and maybe you guys see the same thing, there's a lot of people doing it right now that I look at them and I think, with you not making the investment, your chances of success with now all the new competition and the old competition have gone down a little bit compared to someone that joined before COVID. Are you observing something similar? What are your thoughts on that? Somebody's joining now. How should they do it?
Um, yeah, there was definitely a huge influx of talent. The way I look at it is the ones who are built for this kind of work are the ones who are going to succeed, the ones who are going to have lasting success. Um, it's amazing to me how many successful actors, other areas of voiceover. I have colleagues who are some of the biggest names in video games, animation, live announcing. And they come up to me and they say, "Hey, I hear there's money in audiobooks. Is that right?" And I have to laugh. I'm like, we were always kind of the redheaded stepchild of the voiceover industry for so many years, but suddenly this was the kind of work that we could do even in lockdown. So
it's interesting how popular it suddenly is. I just talked to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation here in New York. I'm going to do a intro to audiobooks for them later this month on the 20th in New York City. And I know the reason I'm doing it is because I believe we all have to give back. I always feel that. But I also think that people are really interested in what we do. Scott and I will tell you that the going rate is not as great as it is for a commercial or as great as it is for other things. But in the world of audiobooks, if you have the skill and the talent and, and drive. It's a
Mhm.
consistent living that carries over year after year after year. I've always made the SAG-AFTRA minimum for insurance, and that insurance program is still the best I know of. And I'm blessed that people keep allowing me to share their stories and to do that.
Amen, brother. Preach. You are absolutely preaching to the choir. Um, it's funny. I teach at UCLA because it's my alma mater, and it's where I got my the very beginnings, my foundation of my voiceover career happened there in one of the classrooms in 1330, room 1330 in McGowan Hall, and you know, I lose a ton of money every time I do it every year because you know it's
You're giving it
uh,
away.
well, yeah, and it's 60 hours, you know, 6 hours for every week for 10 weeks. And it's just, you know, it plays havoc with my schedule. And it's almost always, it happens while I'm recording a Tom Clancy book because they're like clockwork.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Penguin Random House knows, you know, if it's a Clancy and it's October, then it's my schedule is going to be, you know, screwed. But one of the students there asked me, he said, why do you do this? And I said, well, you know, it's important to me. I think knowledge not shared is knowledge wasted. And he said, doesn't this interfere with, I mean, are you still working or are you kind of like semi-retired? I'm like, no, I'm working every day. And he looks at me and he asked again, he said, then why do you do this? Why do you come here?
Yeah.
And it was such an honest question
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I told him, I'm like, I would feel miserable if I didn't. And I
Yeah.
don't mind if I would I don't mind losing money if
Sharing.
I'm doing the right thing for the right reason.
I,
Yeah.
I I think there's a common thread that happens among all people that become somewhat successful and earned it. And that's that they appreciate the fact that they've been able to get to a certain level. And if they have enough, then they want to give back to other people. And here's one of the things that most of you don't know that I do know. Both of these guys have, on occasion, when the right circumstance with the right people, helped out somebody that paid them nothing just because it was that person was doing their part to the max and they recognized they weren't just some sponge. It's not Don calling up Scott going, hey, can I steal 15 minutes of your time and you just tell me something? But instead, somehow we developed a relationship. He saw that that person is working and really working at it. And then these guys are just like, they give up so much to so many people over such a period of time, and they build a reputation in the industry as somebody who's not only really good at the craft but really a good person. And ultimately, man, it's a whole different world. Any comments on that?
Well, my first comment is that I'm only going to give you another 25, 30 minutes to say nice things about me, and then I'm going to cut you right off. But
Yeah.
I'm grateful for your kind words. They mean a lot, and thank you. I will tell you this: I had a relative get in touch. Um, um, we had not spoken in 25 years, so it's not exactly a,
It's not
you know, the closest familial bond.
right.
And she reached out and several years ago and wanted help for her son who had just graduated and he wanted to get into publishing. And so, of course, she reached out to me.
Yeah.
And my partner at the time was livid. She said, "You're being used. You're being used." She asked, you know, she gets in after 25 years, she gets in touch because she needs something. And I said, "Yeah, but I help people I don't know all the time.
Right. Right.
This is somebody who's actually related to me, so why not?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah.
What?
So
Well,
anyway,
I think there's a blessing you feel when, I mean, we're not saying we're being charitable guys all the time,
Right.
but there is something special about it. I think part of the thing is for me, I try to be more helpful and give back a lot. It's court ordered community service in my case, so I have to.
you still wearing the ankle bracelet?
Yes, I am. Yes, I've had them Christmased up. We got jingle bells on.
I'm getting one for the opposite leg, just so I match.
Hey, I'm gonna deal with one of the questions that came up. Steve asked about when is Scott and Johnny? When's our next live workshop? So
March
let's
4th.
tell them, because Don Baarns, by the way, while you were trying to get in, told me he might know some places we can do this too. But
Great.
Scott and I will do the Brick Heller, or Heller Brick if you're me, Business of Audiobooks workshop, which we've done. Is this our 7th one now?
This will be our 6th year.
6th
for doing it. Yes.
We started these. We've done them basically in conjunction with where the Audies are and when they come up. And you know here's the Audies, and then the day before is the evening is a APAC shindig. So that day we do our workshop, and it's a business. It's not like the New England or the Splendiferous or the other things.
We don't even talk about skills. It's just all business.
It's all business. The business that you need to set up, and we bring in business. It's a lovely agenda. We have to find the space, but right now the date was it March 4th or 3rd?
March 4th. It's Sunday, March 4th, because
no, Sunday, March 3rd.
March 3rd.
4th is Monday.
Monday, March 4th is the Audies, and we're doing it the day before, so it's Sunday, March 3rd.
And that'll be in LA. We'll have information online. You'll probably sign up via Scott's website eventually. So we'll have that. We don't have. It's not all set yet. We have to have the
We're finalizing the venue. Yeah.
So it is extremely worthwhile because it's all business. And Scott much more than I, but both of us have been able to advance and keep really good careers because we've created a business entity.
Mm-hmm.
And I one of my coaching laws is you do something for your business every day, something, always something. You don't have to spend 15 hours a day, but you got to do something that keeps your business alive. And you have to start thinking of yourself as a business person.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the genesis of all this for those in the audience. About 6-7 years ago, Johnny came out to LA. He stayed here at the house, and we did a weekend event, Saturday and Sunday, and we brought in a buddy of ours, a colleague, Jeffrey Kafer, who routinely he does coaching about like how to navigate the waters of ACX. So we said, hey, how about this? How about we buy a lunch? You come out to our event. We pay however much it was that we were paying him that day, and while everybody is eating, we'll maximize our time, and people can ask you business questions and how to handle ACX. And so we do this for an hour, and it came time to go back into the booth, and nobody wanted to go back in the booth. Everybody had more and more questions. So I turned to Johnny and I said, "We need a whole day of this. Yeah. This is what our industry needs." Because look, it's so funny. I had somebody recently try to pay me. I did pickups that took an entire day. It was 8 hours of pickups, and they tried to pay me $50, and I was like, "What?" And they said, "Well, that's what the union contract is," and I said, "That's what the union minimum contract is. Yes. I don't work for the union minimum." So anyway, they wound up ponying up the dough. But if I was afraid to do that, if I was brand new,
right,
I'd have been screwed. I would have done an entire day, lost out on another gig for $50.
Yeah,
appreciate the $50. Believe me, I'm grateful that the union organized, for that they negotiated for that. But there's still negotiation that can happen on my end.
Well, so I want to change subject here for just a second. So you and I both live here in the LA area. We're both 30. I don't know. I'm 30 minutes from Hollywood, but I know a bunch of these animation actors, and I had one, and I thought this was pretty funny. So they had heard something you had done, and they were almost indignant, and it just cracked me up because they're so used to doing such diverse character voices. If they're working on an animation and they have 3 characters, their goal is to make them sound so absolute different. And they said, in that audiobook, he just seemed, and their definition by their definition, because they're going for such big, huge character differences, he seemed kind of flat to me. And I thought, man, this guy works every day of I mean, every day and Sundays, and it's a different concept. So can you talk about your concept? Like, why don't you try to do a girl, female, like with a high-pitched voice and yeah, I mean,
Sure.
why don't you do that kind of stuff? The animation people think you should, and they think you're a loser. I don't think the audiobook world thinks so.
Well, all is well. I love my animation brethren, but that's not my gig. That's it's funny. I ran into Bob Bergen and I. We for many years we had the Bob Bergen. For those who don't know, he's the voice of Porky Pig, and lovely, lovely man. As generous as the day is long. And he, the very first time I was, our mutual agent introduced us years ago, Adrian, and so we're at this event, and he goes, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you. You know, I could never do what you do." And I'm like, Porky Pig is telling me he could never do what I do? Ain't no chance in hell I could have the kind of artistry, that would let me do something like him. But the fact of the matter is, we work in totally different genres, and what people who don't work in audiobooks fail to realize is that in the same way that you can fatigue your throat, you can fatigue your vocal cords depending on the kind of voice that you're doing, some over the top character voice. You can fatigue your throat, your instrument, but you can also fatigue the listener's ear. And Al Pacino is great for about 30 seconds, but if you're going to listen to 15 hours, last person you're going to want to listen to is him the whole time. And that's the thing about animation voices. It will fatigue the listener's ear if you're putting that kind of. I mean, look, there's exceptions to every rule. You look at the Harry Potter books, and they're done beautifully by both Jim Dale for the American versions and Stephen Fry for the British versions. They're filled with character voices, and it's appropriate because of the genre. It's larger than life. It's fantasy.
That's the key. The genre is absolutely the key. When I lived in LA, I did lots of animated voices because that was required, but it doesn't always fit. And someone wrote character versus caricature, and I believe that's absolutely dead on.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I do for the most part 21st century realism, right? Gritty, cosmopolitan dramas, searching for a serial killer on the streets of Manhattan or on the streets of LA or whatever.
It takes a couple of minutes.
Yeah. But if I'm doing a voice that you would expect to hear in a Saturday morning cartoon or an animated film, it's like that ain't gonna fly.
So can you I don't mean to have you be an actor today, but so let's say you knew somebody named Hani Geller from New York, maybe a Brad Pitt type, okay?
Yeah.
And then naturally, because that's the fits. And then you have Baarns, who's the geek who really just hates social media, can't talk. How would you differentiate between those two characters? Just saying a simple line. What would you think of for how do you frame this? How do you get started? Maybe the Hani Geller character, New York, Brad Pitt, icon.
Well,
everyone loves him.
I tell you what, it's hard for me to even fathom that concept. It's really taken a lot of imagination on my part. I tell you what,
it's not that creative.
Yeah. What I do is if I have two characters who are the same gender, and it could be to men, to women, whatever it is. If I have to differentiate characters, what I do is I determine who is driving the action, right? Who's telling the story versus who is facilitating the story. And the example I give was years ago, I worked with an author named John Lutz, L-U-T-Z. He wrote the book Single White Female that the movie was based on. Great thriller. And he had the series about a detective named Quinn, and he had a sidekick, essentially. They were both former NYPD, and they were always on the hunt for killers. And they're both men. They're both same socioeconomic background. Both, accent-wise, they're exactly the same. But what I did is I always realized, okay, well, Quinn is the senior partner, and it's his junior partner was the one who was always, suggesting things like, hey, Quinn, you ever think that maybe we're not hunting one guy? Maybe we're hunting two. Yeah, it's possible, but I don't really see it. Yeah, but you can't deny it's a possibility. No, I'm not denying it's a possibility. It is possible. But if I hear hooves, I think horses, not zebras. And I'm using pitch, right? I'm questioning on the one character, and I'm declaring with the other one. I'm pitching up on the first character, the one who's suggesting things, but I'm pitching down to declaim with the guy who is saying, no, this is the way it is.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. My question would be, do you have a vision in your head of these two people, or do you have a zone that you're going to? How do you track? If you had 4 characters, how are you in your head going and keeping track of who you assigned what?
To be honest, I don't go into it to that degree. I don't really make assign things really, other than who's driving the action. Occasionally, I will focus on, like, okay, well, this guy seems more contemplative, therefore I will speak slower. I'll slow my pace down, because nothing will make somebody stand out than somebody who takes their time, is confident enough in what they're saying to go slow.
That's extremely important. The whole idea, listen what Scott's doing, because a lot of people, this is a simple thing that's so simple people almost ignore it, but pitch and pace make a giant difference. When someone calls you on the phone, you know who they are, not just because the phone number flashes, but when Scott Brick calls you, it's his voice. When I call him, it's my voice. No one sounds quite like us. No one has that same pace and style and everything. When you get different characters in an audiobook, and Scott and I have done it, well over 1,000 books each, different. It's instinctive for us now. But early when I started, I still cast my characters from my frame of reference. If a character's in a book, I said, this is a Don Baarns guy. This is a Scott Brick guy. This is a Paul Allen Rubin guy. I don't need to do impersonations of any of them. But if I'm reading in what I think is my Scott Brick style, it's going to be different than my Don Baarns style, and certainly different than my Paul Rubin style, who's right here listening to us and enjoying it, I think.
Paul Rubin?
Yeah, Paul Rubin. That's me. I'm hungry for a sandwich.
I tell you what, years ago, I got asked, what is the most important thing about, in your repertoire? What is the most important part of your process when you're acting with your voice? I said, when I'm acting with my voice, the last thing I think about is my voice. Yeah. I don't think about my voice at all. What I think about is the text. What I think about is connecting emotionally to the text. And I tell this story all the time. And for some people in the audience, I'm sure this is a repeat and boring, but I was working with Alex Hyde White years ago in a class here in LA. Alex is the son of Wilfred Hyde White, famous British character actor, marvelous performer. And Alex got into audiobooks. He's a gifted narrator, and he came and took my class. And we were focusing that day on emphasis. When we get a piece of text and there's an exclamation mark, what's the first thing we do? We raise our volume. We think that means be loud. No, it just means emphasis. And there are 8 ways that you can emphasize human speech. So that's what we're talking about in class. And he does this marvelous reading from a biography of Truman Capote, in which Capote is speaking to a woman in his life that he called Big Mama. And Big Mama tells him that she loves him. He says, "No, you don't, Big Mama." She says, "Truman, of course I love you." "No, Big Mama, you don't love me." "Truman, why would you say that I don't love you?" "Because I don't deserve to be loved, Big Mama." And when he got to that line, 11 people in the room behind me in the outer booth gasped. It was lovely. It was like we'd been kicked in the gut. But he didn't know because the talkback was closed. He had no idea everybody's response. I wanted to make him aware of it. So I go on the talkback, I open it up. And because I didn't want him to change anything. I didn't want to give him feedback and have him change his reading. It was perfect. But it was class. And so what I did was, hooking it into, the subject of the day, I said, "Alex, what I noticed you did on that last line, 'I don't deserve to be loved, Big Mama,' you did 3 things that we've been talking about tonight. You paused before you said the line. You slowed down your pace as you said the line, and you dropped your volume. You did all 3 of those things simultaneously. 3 of the 8 means of emphasis. You did 3 of them. And I'm curious if that was your intention. If, as you were approaching the last line of this piece, you said, okay, here's where I have to pause and get quiet and slow down." And he said, "No, I didn't think about any of that." I said, "Do you mind sharing with us what you were thinking of?" He said, "I was thinking of all the times in my life where I felt like I didn't deserve to be loved." And I said, "Well, here's the thing. You connected to the text emotionally. And it was at that exact moment that everybody in this room connected to you, and through you to the text, to the story, to the author. That's just the way it is. Here's the thing, AI could do all 3 of those things. It could slow down, it could drop its volume, it could pause, if it's programmed to do that. But it will never know why it's doing that. And without that connection, that moment is worthless.
To answer some of the questions that are coming through, I'm going to hit some of them because I know we tend to chat around and never get to the questions.
Are you saying that I talk too much?
No, Don does. When John Walker's had a number of questions, the one he mentioned one Scott just touched on, how does AI impact our business? And I do want to touch on Benjamin and Tony's questions as well. In terms of AI impacting, look, AI exists right now. Scott just gave a number of instances that AI could never even touch. AI simply can't touch the human emotion, the ability of the human actor to creatively emote and engage a listener in effective storytelling. It's not gonna be there. I don't think it'll ever be there. If people are comfortable listening to a computer do audiobooks, that's when it'll affect our business. And one of the ways to make sure, and then what's going to happen, the award ceremony will be, the laptop MacBook Pro is going to win an award. That'll be when we know it's over. But until that time, your job is to continue to be wonderful, to continue to be engaging, continue to tell the story the way the author wrote. A lot of the questions are coming up. Like, for example, we bring in Tony and Benjamin, both about characters. Benjamin asks, how do you play cinematic characters that people know about? Well, I did the Ghostbusters book. I've done all kinds of, I did MASH, Richard Hooker's book, which was great. It's not even available anymore. I don't know why, but it's a really good book. Now MASH was a huge, huge hit. 11 years on television. The movie was a hit. You play the characters the author wrote, not what the cinematic or television actors did or do. Mm-hmm. That's not what because the author wrote the book, and then other actors made choices based on scripts that weren't written by the author. The movie script isn't the book script.
Yeah. I think there's, I wrote a blog post about this 10 years ago because I got hired to do the book, The Graduate. and of course there's that very famous line, Elaine, Elaine, as he's interrupting the wedding. But then there's also Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me, and I've done that. I did that book. I did Heart of Darkness, and there's that line, the horror, the horror. I've done Frankenstein. I've done done a lot of. I do the Sideways series, and there are certain lines that I think you can get away with doing it the way that the actor did, because especially if it's the takeaway moment, right? Frankly, the line, it's alive, doesn't appear in Frankenstein. But if it did, I would do it the same way that the guy did it in the 1932 film.
There are choices you have to make sometimes based on what's happening. When I did, after he
Because
died,
it's expected.
I'm sorry?
Because it's expected. It's the takeaway line of the film. So, I'm not drinking any fucking Merlot. I did it the exact same way that Paul Giamatti did.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you don't, people will feel like they've been cheated.
Exactly right.
Anyway,
and that's a choice you made that makes
I'm
sense. There are certain choices we need to make, but it's even that choice to do it that well, you've got to still, if you choose to do the Giamatti read, which is fine, it makes sense because it has to be there, well, then it has to make sense in your reading. It can't come out of the blue. Right. Scott has to set it up so that makes sense, so it doesn't alarm anyone. It pleases everyone, because that's one of our jobs.
Yeah.
When I did, who's the hippie dippy weatherman? Why is his name escaping me? The comic.
Flip Wilson.
No. The 7 filthy words you can't say on TV.
Carlin, George Carlin.
George Carlin. Okay, his name just escaped because I'm old and losing it all. The George Carlin estate after he died had me do a George Carlin biography. And I would not have made this choice the same. I wouldn't have made certain choices in other books, but you're asked to and you do it because that's where the money is. They wanted the book I did, the story I did normally. The George Carlin comedy bits, which were in the book, I just did my impersonation of George Carlin, because the comedy you'll find won't work if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain choices you must make. So when you play known characters, it really depends on the specific circumstances that are in that book, in that story. Yeah. And one way is going to work and one way will not. And if you make a choice that doesn't work, and acting is simply making choices, you'll know that the choice doesn't work because you won't be able to say the word cat or the or of. As soon as you go up on words you can say normally, understand the choice you just made a moment ago is probably not the best choice, in my experience.
So we have someone asking, how do you approach accents and regions like those in a book that seems like you did?
Well, to be honest, it's a fine line that I walk with accents. I think that we can suggest things, and rather than being, slavish to, the way, every vowel sound, every diphthong, the way it's supposed to come out. I think, how everybody at some point or another has said, you know what, I'm calling bullshit on that. My bullshit meter is going off. I think that is code for our ability, of our minds to identify authenticity, right? We can hear it a mile away. That's why, it's easy for me to say this. I work a lot. I'm not all that worried about AI because, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to pretend like it's not an issue. It is. But I have never heard an authentic sounding AI. I've never heard it do that, because I don't deserve to be loved, Big Mama moment. I've never heard that kind of authenticity. So what I strive for in my narration, when I'm dealing with accents, is I aim for authenticity rather than accuracy. And I'll define my terms. Authenticity is the emotional authenticity of the scene. accuracy to me is, the accuracy of, being pitch perfect on your accent. I think you can let that go. And if I'm not, if I'm not doing a Scottish brogue, let's say I'm doing it like to Meryl Streep level of perfection. It's going to be so difficult to understand because Scottish, when you get it, when you're thick in the weeds,
It's like
you know,
Boston.
yeah, right, exactly. Almost any accent, if you go that deep into it and you're focusing on the accuracy more than anything else, I think it's an empty experience. But if instead I focus on the emotional authenticity of the scene and I give them a hint enough to suggest and let them imagine the rest, then I think I'm doing my job correctly. And I don't think that I think that I could fail on the accent. If I'm going for that kind of accuracy, when I fail, that's what they'll notice.
Yes, the judgment will be about your failure to do the Northern London Cockney versus Southern London Cockney, as opposed to what happened in the story.
Yep.
But as long as I give them what the author intends, what they
Yes.
need, then I think that's their takeaway.
I agree.
Right. So Southern for you, you're not worried about you do Southern Louisiana Southern versus Kentucky Southern. You want it to feel like they're from a region and be consistent within yourself, but just enough to hint at it. Close.
Well, yeah, I tell you what I did on a very specific project. I did In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, and they talk, and it takes place in Kansas. It's a true story, a fictionalized telling of a true story, the murder of the Clutter family. And at the time that I recorded it, I had never been to Kansas City. I'd never been to Kansas at all. I other than a layover in an airport, and I'm sorry that doesn't count, right? So Capote talked about the northern Kansan accent, the southern Kansan accent, the east southwestern Kansan accent. He went into great detail that I was never going to be able to achieve. However, what I did is I looked at the word he used in the attribution. Rather than saying he said or she said, he quite often used the word he drawled in the eastern southwestern Kansan accent. He drawled. Well, look, I grew up in Porterville, which is about 3 hours north of Los Angeles. I grew up with shit kickers. I know how to drawl. And so all I did, the only adjustment I made is I just spoke very measured, slowly. I drawled, and it was very non-specific. You couldn't identify it. It's exactly what I'm doing right now. I just went slow and measured. And I got 2 reviews later when the book came out. One of them was, I'm trying to remember which was which. One of them was Audiophile Magazine, and the other one was Publishers Weekly. One of them said, the reason this book works so well is that Scott doesn't do the accents. He allows us to imagine those for ourselves. And I thought that's great. That is insightful. The other one said, this book sings because Scott's accents are flawless, down to the local regionalisms. And I am convinced that even though they sound like they conflict, I'm convinced that they are both accurate. It's just that the reviewer, that second reviewer, they heard the accent. They heard a flawless accent, but they didn't realize that it had been suggested and they were filling that in for themselves. They were hearing it in their ears.
I want to take one of the questions that I think Tina asked a little bit ago about how to keep your voice similar. Maybe I'm wrong who did it. How do you keep things the same when you go back to the recording session? If I understand the question right, that's not the one I'm looking at. But anyway, here's I can't remember what the hell question is. Consistent. There it is. Every recording session. One piece of advice. I mean, you may record one day at 10 a.m. and the next day, if you're doing your home studio, at 2. So, and I promise you, you sound differently at different times of the day. We all have a morning, we all sound different. So whatever you find is the best time for you to do the work is when you should do it. But I advise you, when you get into the next session, to listen to how you closed off the previous one. No one can do an impersonation of you as good as you. And I promise, whether it's your morning, evening, or afternoon voice, you'll be able to pick up on it. So what happens, it's a bit jarring for many listeners of audiobooks, is, you read, it's 7 chapters. So, and then Scott went to bed. That's the end of chapter 7. Then chapter 8. The next day, Scott, all of a sudden, there's this big booming bullshit sound like, who's doing the book now? Scott just did some blow and he's taking off. So you need to listen to what you just finished. And I think that's an excellent way to keep things fluid. And if you have more energy than you closed with, because you're tired, let it come in gradually, because the listener will just accept it. As Scott just said, the listener was willing to accept flawless accents when Scott only basically suggested the accent. Listeners suspend their belief all the time. If Scott does a one-man show and he does all of Scott's influences throughout his life, Cyrano de Bergerac to his acting teacher, to Suzanne, to God bless him, Sean Pratt, he'll play all these people, and we're willing to accept that he's all those people because that's natural for us. Too many of us narrators, us actors, are too worried about our authenticity and believability. And as Scott has said time and again, the authenticity is an emotional authenticity, not an absolute authenticity. Scott is not from Kansas City.
Right.
So you just need to realize that as long as you're true to what the author wrote and do this engaging storytelling that I talk about so much, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
There's also things that you can do, like for hydration. I think I'm the unofficial hydration guru of the audiobook industry. Having, I won't start my recording session until I've had 2 liters of water. I also make sure that I've showered before I get started, and not because I'm worried about offending anybody or even offending myself in the booth. It's because when you breathe in the steam from the shower, it helps your pipes. So, there have been times it's like, oh, I'll shower at the end of the day because we're going to be heading out and going to a Christmas party, or going to a dinner at, it's like, no, I really need to do it before I begin, because I'm consistent. I'm doing that every single day. So I will sound the same every single day.
I will say from my experience on that, I drink tons of water, always do. I don't necessarily have 2 liters before I do anything, because then I'll spend my first hour peeing. So
you do add a lot of vitamin P to your diet.
But I think you need to keep hydrated, but I don't do any specific things myself. I mean, people use the throat coat tea and all these other things. I think a shot of bourbon is just as effective.
Well, so both of you, though, do you have a pre-game routine that you do every time before you step into the booth? It sounds like you do. So Scott, you are saying before you record, you do your shower, you do a certain amount of water, and Johnny, I'm gonna guess you have a pre-booth routine as well, correct? Incorrect?
You would be wrong, my friend.
Okay.
I do not.
But that's an interesting thing. That means that some people are going to do real well without it. Obviously, Johnny's done okay. And Scott he likes to have a pregame routine, which you'll see athletes and actors, they put on their headphones. They do certain things. All sorts of entertainers have a pregame routine before they speak, before they act, before they go out and do things. There are a few outliers. Johnny's one of those that could walk up, and I think some of that's from your improv days, by the way, Johnny, that because you have because you've had to go out and perform and be in the moment, you don't need the kind of prep most of us need. For most of us, I suspect that Mr. Brick, I'm more like Mr. Brick. I do the same thing every day for a lot of things.
It's funny. I've been asked like what kind of vocal warm-ups I do, and the answer is none, unless I know that I'm going to be doing something well, what's the word I'm looking for? Classical in nature, I guess. You need to have the dexterity, the nimble lips if you're going to be doing Shakespeare, let's say. Johnny and I got to do Macbeth a couple of years ago with Paul Rubin. It was a marvelous experience. And so I found myself doing warm ups before that because the context called for it, because the genre called for it. I did a multi-voice thing recently about where I was reading the words of Abraham Lincoln, his written words. I was saying them aloud, and you know, there's a different structure to the same thing when I did the Alexander Hamilton biography that the musical was based upon. Um, it's just different.
When you do things like that, like Shakespeare's the iambic pentameter is written in a certain style. There's only one way that it's going to work for you. As we come closer to the hour, I want to say one thing. I want to say first, remember Scott and I will have the Brick Heller business workshop
Yes.
out in LA on Sunday, March 3rd. Details will come up. Someone mentioned, hey, Timothy mentioned it's time for a workshop in Phoenix. I will say Sean Allen Pratt and I plan on taking our show on the road to Albuquerque, New Mexico at the end of March. I don't that, and because of my sense of geography is non-existent, I assume that's right next to Phoenix. So if it isn't, as far as I know, it is. And then Paul Rubin, who's listening now, he and I have about 3 more spaces maybe left on this coming Sunday, December 10th in New York City, specific audiobook acting intensive workshop in New York City. You go to my website for that. Scott, anything coming up you want to plug?
Well, I do want to stress one thing. We haven't put the purchase page up for our business event on my website. You can go to it. It's scottbrick.com, scottbrick.net, Brick by Brick Audiobooks. Any of those will take you to the website. We don't have the link yet where you can buy your ticket. However, if you send in an email through the contact button, you can be first in line, basically. We always sell out. We always sell out. And you can make sure that you are essentially first in line. As soon as the tickets go on sale, you'll get the very first ones. So go to the website, hit the contact button, and say, please hold me a seat, and we will do so.
And I have to throw a plug in there. We're doing some technical things. Punch and Roll in a Day is going to come up between Christmas and New Year's. So there's so many people that wanted to know how to do that. And so we have a live seminar that will be going on between Christmas and New Year's during that break in between. So yeah, so we'll talk about that another time. But Scott, the thing is we what we really need is about 14 hours of your time. So now, since you give it away all the other days of the week, we want you back sometime here very soon. Appreciate you taking the time with us. And so I apologize to people. We didn't get through all the questions. What we will do is, as soon as practical, we will invite this gentleman back. If he's nice enough to say yes, then we'll have him here again. And what you need to do, go to his website, flood him. Hey, would you go back and do that again? Okay. And he'll appreciate that. Okay. Don't say I do. All right. So, Johnny, any last words?
No, I just want to thank Scott. I mean, he's not one of my best friends. He's a dear and wonderful human being. And I really, I appreciate his sharing his knowledge and his wealth of information without being a douche about it. Good work. Yeah.
Well, Johnny, as you know, I'm a douche in private.
I know.
We keep that. We keep that amongst ourselves.
If you guys saw half the things we say to each other, your respect.
Let's just say it ain't right.
And also, are you guys, when you do your business things, are you going to have virtual replays available? Because that is something that people want from you guys. And if you haven't figured that out, let me know, because that's
we've talked about it in the past. We're kind of in two different camps about it. Not that we disagree, but we see the wisdom of both sides. I think there's something to be said for being there in person.
Cool.
That this is something. It's like theater versus film.
Okay.
There's something to be said for it happening live, and you have to be present. Then again, we are piping in people who live elsewhere, and we've got like a Zoom connection so that they can appear.
Okay.
It's conceivable, but there is a lot of proprietary information that is given to those who are there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'll
We
actually would leave
also
it at this.
we also we for 5 straight years we have done this. We end with a publishers roundtable, and representatives of all of the major publishers show up, and they share with the people in the audience maybe things that they wouldn't really want
Right.
shared on a video replay later.
Yeah.
So the fact that that you have their attention in person, I think they're a bit more free with their information, with their knowledge.
I also think
So
those publishers, I just interrupt you here, when publishers find out that you've gone to a Heller Brick event, and they find out that you are attending and studying with some of the best people in the industry and trying to get better and better at the craft, they're going to take you more seriously. It's just a different thing than I just say, well, I'm studying on my own. I'm watching YouTube videos, which,
right,
some of those are great and some of them are not so great. And one of the things about this crowdsourcing stuff is the best thing in the world and the worst thing in the world, depending on who you're listening to.
Yeah,
So,
Don, we're a YouTube video now.
I know. Yeah. No, but that's the thing. It is so here's one of the final things that I'll, as we close down, vet your mentors wisely.
yes.
If you are smart enough to go to a Heller, to go to a Scott Brick, and there's Paul Rubin, there's so many great people out there. And then there's so many loud people out there who I just shake my head sometimes and go, and I'm sure these two, we all do this. We just kind of go, man, that's advice, but it's really no perspective. And the difference is find the people that have the perspective and take their lead. And then later, as you mature, man, you can go 100 directions and you'll come out better than many of us here today. So
my very first class that I ever taught alone, I've worked with Pat Fraley a great deal over the years, but when I was asked to teach solo independently, it was out of town. I went up there and to Northern California. I taught this class. One of the students had never done an audiobook. She took my class. She did an audiobook. And the following month started teaching classes about how to narrate audiobook.
Oh, well, that's some perspective.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Don, if you don't mind, I'd like to do a plug, if I may.
Go for it.
J. Michael Collins was kind enough to hire me this past year to manage all of the audiobook content at VO Atlanta. And it's something I'm really proud of. We're never going to try to compete with, let's say, APAC, the Audio Publishers Association conference, because that, everybody shows up to APAC, and the difference is you don't usually have an opportunity there to get into the skills the way that we do at VO Atlanta. And Johnny was kind enough to come last year, and Sean Pratt and January Lavoie and basically our focus was, let's just get people work. Let's get them the skills that they need to be able to go out and book audiobook work. So I've got that coming up in March of this coming year. And if people can work that into their schedule, there will be a ton of opportunities to learn.
I believe it's after the Audies is on Monday. I think it's that following weekend.
Exactly. Monday
7th,
the
8th
4th.
or something. Yeah.
Monday the 4th. I think we covered that earlier.
Yeah.
Monday the 4th. We are then flying out on Wednesday so that we can be there for Thursday night.
I won't be there, but don't let that prevent you from showing up.
I'll tell you what, man. Last year, we pulled out all the stops. We had 9 instructors on hand. Johnny and Sean Pratt and Vikas Adam and Hillary Huber and Suzanne and myself and January Lavoie and Will Dameron. I mean, we just pulled out all the stops. We can't do that every year. It's probably going to be like a rotating schedule in the years to come. But I'm very proud of the skills of the knowledge that we get to share. And and there we've got a lot of publishers who are showing up this year for an in-person audition. So you can read once and have a dozen different publishers and producers in the audience all seeing you at the same time.
Yeah,
So,
it's a great thing. So it's a business of knowing people, meeting people, and being a good person all at the same time. These two do that in spades. So thank you for attending. We look forward to seeing you next week. Note, subscribe to the channel. Share this out in all those social media groups that you're in. Let other people know about what's going on. And of course, Johnny and I will be here next week. We're excited to have you. And as always, we'll see you on the wires. Bye-bye.
Bye.